Hey y'all, this is Mongo. There was a book written called Lexus The Oliver Tree by Thomas L. Friedman in the year 2000. It was looking to explain global economics in post-Cold War. Basically, there's two concepts. There was the olive tree, which is the concept of tribalism, national identity, and traditions and things like that. And you have the Lexus, which is the symbol of modernity, of moving forward, of progressivism. And in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two metaphors and I'm going to apply it roughly to the concept of the debate that's been going on between Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer, or basically Jim Cornette versus everybody. And to start doing that, we got to look at the Lexus and the olive tree version of pro wrestling. So the first thing I want to look at is, what is the olive tree? The olive tree has to come first because olive tree is about the identity. What is something based off of? Like, who are you in relation to what? So in the olive tree or the Lexus and the olive tree. In the olive tree you have sports, and in the Lexus you have sports entertainment. So what is sports? There's a list of things that are routine in sports, usually in combat sports, which is the thing that we want to look at here, that are routine as far as sports are concerned. So a sports-based presentation or a sports presentation usually has time limits, there's records, there's a tournament style, basically that wins and losses matter, and that, you know, the more you win, the further along you go. There's statistics, there's rounds, there's internal logic. Basically the rules are always the same. So, headbutts are always illegal in boxing. They're always illegal in MMA. So, hitting people in the nuts and stuff like that. And it's competition for competition's sake. Essentially, it's okay for two friends to fight because it's for the sake of competition. It's not that somebody is, gotta want to hurt somebody else. It's, hey, you and I gotta play. We can go have a beer later, even though theoretically, you know how wrestling works, right? But another thing that they have also is weight classes. You're not going to have a 205-pound man and a 125-pound man in the same division. It's just not going to happen. So what is sports entertainment? Well, sports entertainment is almost exactly the opposite. So you're going to have a focus on storytelling, which means a focus on being more theater. So there's more drama, there's more intrigue. Yes, there's drama in sports. That's why a lot of people like sports. And that's why ESPN is around so long. But the drama in sports is either one, manufactured by commentators, analysts, and things like that, or is completely accidental. Like the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury fight, where it was a lot of drama about Tyson Fury almost getting knocked out, and then him coming back to finish the fight. That's a very dramatic moment, but it was not scripted, and it was not something that somebody put together. Sports entertainment also has very malleable rules. Basically, closed fists are illegal sometimes. Sometimes they're not. Throwing people over the top rope is illegal sometimes. Sometimes there's a time limit, sometimes there isn't. You have a lot of wins and losses that are dictated by storytelling. Basically, who wins and who loses based off of who needs to win and who needs to lose, based on whatever story you're trying to tell. There's a lot of grudges. Actually, there's more grudges. And yes, there are grudges in sports. But again, a lot of that stuff is manufactured. In wrestling, it's meant to be like a blood feud. You got two guys who are usually baby faces and heels, which is another thing. Two baby faces really don't fight each other, and two heels really don't fight each other. And you have a lot of untelevised performances in sports entertainment. So you will have house shows, essentially, which hurts the concept of the tournament style of wins and losses matter, because people lose and win in house shows, and nobody keeps track of that stuff, except for maybe complete and total dweebs online, which of you might be one. So when you look at these sort of concepts, that sports and sports entertainment, if you are paying attention, you will know that sports entertainment is based off sports. It takes a lot of the things from sports and puts them into an entertainment venue. Over time, all sports have become essentially entertainment because they are, but not all entertainment is sports. A movie is not a sport. A cartoon is not a sport, but a cartoon is entertainment. So that's the concept that we're looking at here is all pro wrestling is sports entertainment, whether it wants to be or not, right? Because it's not real. But some of it is more sports based than other pro wrestling promotions, which you can almost say is completely and totally divorced from sports. And that's really what we're talking about here, is how far from the core concept can you diverge before you become something completely different. At what pro wrestling is born from the original concept of wrestling. Wrestling is one of the oldest sports in the world, right? So legitimate amateur wrestling is a real sport. You can really get hurt. Wins and losses are real. You can really be trained in it, all that stuff. Pro wrestling is, hey, what if we could do this stuff more frequently, and we'll just pick winners and losers, and, we'll probably make more money not really hurting each other. So it's based on a real sport, and it used to be based on a real sport where you really had to be a shooter. You really had to be fundamentally trained in order for what you do to look good and to really work in front of an audience. You had to have that legitimate wrestling background. It's not like that anymore. Now you can literally come from anywhere and be considered a pro wrestler, which of course is part of the problem, right? So how far can we diverge before we say it's not even sports anymore? And this is the situation that we're dealing with Jim Cornette, because Jim Cornette comes from this concept of not wrestling as a sport, but before you to approach it as a sport, it has to be approached. It's not real, but it needs to be approached as if it is, which means it needs to have set rules. It needs to have tradition. It needs to have history. You need to have it needs to be serious and promoted and pushed as something that is a serious thing. You can't have obviously phony, obviously choreographed, obviously fake stuff. You can't have, but he still believes in the concept of the theater, of the drama, of the storyline, of being involved in superhuman situations of guys constantly bench pressing people over their heads and the Irish whip. He believes enough in the entertainment realm that, in some documentaries, he would even say that it needs to be an entertaining sport, which of course makes no sense to me because it's all sports entertainment. But when you look at the olive tree, because the olive tree is based off national identity and tradition and things like that, it creates a clear delineation between what something is and what it is not. Who is American and who is not, who is Canadian and who is not. And because you do that, you create an exclusionary situation where by definition, you're excluding people, right? Who can be a pro wrestler and who can't. And you hear this in Jim Cornette's talking points where he says things like Kenny Omega should be boiled in oil. He should have his legs broken for exposing the business. So-and-so was killing the business. They're all exposing the business. And, they all need to be kicked out and all that sort of stuff. Because in his view, pro wrestling is a single thing. It cannot be anything except what it is. And I tend to lean more towards that, but I'm a little bit more loose than Jim Cornette. But the Lexus is the concept of modernity, that pro wrestling can be anything. That, as long as it's taking place in a ring, it could be pro wrestling. You could have women fighting men. You can have the invisible man, the invisible hand grenade, hypnotizing people, and choke slams and death matches. Invisible choke slams, I mean. Death matches. Shit like The Undertaker. Shit like the Onita Funk exploding ring fiasco. All of this is considered pro wrestling, as well as Kenny Omega wrestling children. All this can be considered pro wrestling. And the problem that you have with the Lexus concept is that you completely divorced it from the sports at the root. It's not a sport anymore. It's now just shit happening. Like we're just going to keep going forward. And I think Jim Cornette makes a really good point here, is that at what point do we reach the point of diminishing returns where people stop looking at it as something serious and start looking at it as a clown show? And this was something that we had to deal with, that, people have been dealing with for a long time, because Vince McMahon was pretty honest in telling people that it's not real and then showing people that it's not real. So this is why it's the sort of Jim Cornette concept versus everybody else. So when we dealing with how to best make everybody happy, you're not going to be able to make everybody happy, okay? But the Lexus concept is not really working. The concept of any and everything is pro wrestling, it turns off a large part of the audience. Just like, the boring, plotting 80s territory style that Jim Cornette likes, it doesn't work for everybody because it's too slow. A lot of the guys were not in any type of physical shape. The commentators were slow and drab, and you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, which is another Jim Cornette saying. You can't go back and make people feel like it's real again. We're past that. We know part of the allure and the love of territory style NWA wrestling is that people believed that it was real. They believed at least enough of it was real that they were able to get invested. They were able to really become emotionally invested in the story, which is, when he talks about riots, that, you caused a riot, is because people truly believed that you were trying to kill the babyface when you put, the chair around his leg and jumped on it, that you was really trying to break his leg. Now people kind of, they go, oh, but they kind of giggle too, right? You never really get that same level of, and this is even in the fans. And this is this is a great rant on one of the Jim Cornette podcasts, and he's talking about how the sort of Lexus mind state that pro wrestling can be anything is coming from everybody. It's coming from the wrestlers themselves. It's coming from the analysts themselves. It's coming from the fans. Nobody believes in anything. There's no legitimacy to anything. Everything is a fucking joke. Everything is, and I agree with that, right? Like, you should not have everybody knows everybody's gimmick. You shouldn't have all of these performers who wrestle on TV having their real names in their Twitter profiles and all that sort of stuff. It breaks the concept of immersion. Look, I get it that Dolph Ziggler is not the guy's name, but when his real name is on the Twitter handle, is he trying to blur reality? Like, I don't really get why he would want to blur reality. I think that people are following Dolph Ziggler because they follow the character. They don't really know the man, but that's neither here nor there. I just don't like it, which is why I don't follow wrestlers on Twitter. So that sort of concept that wrestling can be anything, and that it's all about creativity and being imaginative and all that sort of stuff, it is detrimental because it needs to be tethered to something. We need to know what it is and what it is not. We need to know what is possible in this world and what isn't. And different wrestling audiences think that they can just redefine this. This came up in the Ryan Satin, Jim Cornette, when they had a fluff a couple of months ago actually. And when they were doing it was a company doing the Invisible Man gimmick. And they were talking about there's an Invisible Man in this specific promotion. And Ryan Satin says, well, this promotion does the Invisible Man. Shouldn't it be okay just in this promotion or in the promotion that chooses to do it? And Jim Cornette says, fuck no. Wrestling should be the same everywhere. And this is the olive tree concept coming back out. Because another negative about the olive tree, not just that it excludes people, but it also looks to colonize other olive trees. In the same way, because I'm adapting a metaphor from a economics book. So when you look at olive trees or national identities, national pride, countries are constantly invading each other, right? Constantly going into each other, trying to take over and say, your olive tree is now mine. Your borders are now mine. We excluded you at first. Like, at first you were on your own, but now we've gotten so much power that we're going to go into and take your stuff. This is the concept that Jim Cornette, pushes out when he was going after Ryan Satin about the Invisible Man. He's like, no, it's not just the territory system needs to exist. It just needs to exist everywhere. It's not. And this is the one positive thing that the sort of Lexus mind state of wrestling can be anything is they're willing to segment the audience that, okay, Undertaker can shoot lightning over here. That doesn't mean if he leaves this place, he's going to be able to shoot lightning, right? Like, we get that, it's kind of dorky for Cody to dress up like Captain Picard from Star Trek or Kenny Omega to do Undertale, but his audience understands that, right? It works for his audience. Just like the slow, plotting, wrist lock, 45-minute headlock stuff that worked in the territory days, that was for that audience. And that every audience can ask and make demands. The deathmatch audience wants a certain thing. They want people to fall on these butcher knives and stuff like that. It should be okay for that audience. As long as that audience doesn't try to force it upon every other promotion, it should be fine. And Jim Cornette says no. Wrestling should be the same because this is what pro wrestling is. This is what it started as. You shouldn't deviate too far from it because then you lose what it is. And I understand both points. I didn't necessarily agree. I think it's fucking stupid to do the Invisible Man or to wrestle a 9-year-old girl. I don't think that is. I think that wrestling does need to have some realism to it. But I also think you can have high levels of athleticism. And now I actually expect it. I refuse to watch the old territory stuff where guys would just put each other in a headlock for 40 minutes and then be like, wow, this is a 5-star classic. No, fuck you. And part of the argument here is that Dave Meltzer used to co-sign this sort of thing. And this is why the Meltzer Cornette argument makes a lot of sense to me, because Dave Meltzer is a guy who has for a long time had the olive tree mindset. He was a big booster of Ring of Honor, especially, and he was also a booster of Ring of Honor. And Jim Cornette used to work at Ring of Honor, right? Dave Meltzer was also a booster of the NWA. He was the guy giving all these people 5-star classics all the time. He does the same thing with New Japan. But now that he's friends with the people in AEW, he's not really being as critical. He is saying, well, it works for that audience. And Jim Cornette says, well, what about the Ultimate Warrior? What about the Junkyard Dog? When they worked for their audience, you were still calling it bad. You were calling them trash, the Anabolic Warrior and the Junk Food Dog. Be consistent. And Dave Meltzer is like, well, no, I'm a Lexus now. I'm a Lexus thinker now. I'm being progressive. Wrestling can be anything. This stuff is fun. The audience likes it. We just gonna run with that because it's real convenient for Dave Meltzer to be like, well, we're gonna run with this now, right? So, and this is where the schism comes from, because Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer for a long time agreed on what pro wrestling was. A sports-based entertainment concept that had it was entertainment, but it had a lot of sport in it. It wasn't over the top, and even though Cornette was involved with a lot of the over the top stuff, which also makes him a hypocrite. But Dave Meltzer also, attacked him on that stuff. And Jim Cornette admits that a lot of that stuff that he was involved with was dumb. But now the opposite is true. And Dave Meltzer is just saying, well, I'm being progressive. The game has passed you by. You're an old fuddy-duddy. And Meltzer is like, why are you afraid of being considered old when you are old, for starters? And secondly, you are one of the people who used to push this stuff. And it's not about which one is right or wrong. It's all about which one you just agree with, right? Pro wrestling is what it is, all right? The WWE has changed a lot from what it used to be. It used to be the land of the giants. Now it's not. Adam Cole is a fucking midget. Seth Rollins is tall, but, he's not the guy. Back in the early 90s, somebody like Braun Strowman would have been world champion by now. Somebody like that would have been a big star. Now instead of being sort of the middling mid-card guy, the WWE has changed. It's no longer the land of the giants, even though they still want approved body types, which I agree with. Again, I'm all about you need to change the athletic standards because guys are getting smaller and, that sort of thing. You got to change those standards. So you can't have a lot of dumpy guys who look like they're in male diapers in the ring and think it's going to draw a lot of money because, it doesn't work. Like the Tracy Smothers experiment is not going to work today. The Bullet Bob Armstrong, no, nobody wants to. I mean, they might be, again, they fit their audience. That Southern style, that fits that audience. If you put Tracy Smothers in New York, I mean, he looks like fucking, what's the name of the kid from the Andy Griffith show? He'd be like that, Opie, whatever, it just would not work, so it's not that. You have to do something else. The game has to change and that sometimes means that good workers who don't have the look, they don't make it. This is why, you might have this chick on the indies who can really work, but she doesn't look like Mandy Rose. So Mandy Rose gets the job and she doesn't. Tough shit. And I know a lot of people are going to be upset about that, but tough shit. Because Mandy Rose, her job is not to go out there and do flying head scissors and all that stuff. Part of it is just to look like somebody who can get into a legitimate fight. And she can do that. She's in great shape. Her being like a supermodel beautiful is a little over the top, especially when you compare it to like the MMA fighters, because they pin their hair up and they don't wear makeup to the ring and stuff like that. But, presentation and how you look is a part of the job. It's always been a part of the wrestling business. Do you have the look? It's always been a part of it. That's why some guys wear face paint. That's why some guys wear masks. What kind of haircut you have, your body type, all that stuff matters in the entertainment business because it matters in Hollywood. You're not. This is part of. I don't want to veer off too much, but this is part of why a lot of guys were upset about Thor in Endgame. Is you put this guy who's this big chiseled hero, and you put him in a fat bodysuit, and it's like that's not what a hero looks like. A hero does not look like Kevin Owens. Okay, and I know a lot of people like Kevin Owens, but that dumpy body type is not really what people think of when they think of heroes. They think of Superman. They think of the big, strong, 6 foot, broad back hero. That's what they think of. And you could try to change that and say, well, a hero could look like Shrek. And yeah, sometimes a hero can look like Shrek. But you have to be a really impressive motherfucker to be Shrek. And sometimes you're just not that good. Not to say that Kevin Owens is not that good. I'm just using him as an example. So what can we do to bring the two together to end this once and for all? You're not really going to end it once and for all because the people who believe in the olive tree are dogmatic. Again, it's tradition. It's the way things always been. This is the core of what something is. You cannot change it too much without ruining it. So you kind of have to just accept that those people will exist, and you have to create something for those people. And this is where I think NXT and New Japan and Ring of Honor come in. Because I think New Japan, Ring of Honor, and NXT do the best when it comes to sports-based pro wrestling. They don't have, WWE has a weight class, but NXT kind of adopted that weight class system. Even though it's not hard and fast because you'll have, a giant guy fighting a midget, and it's just, that's kind of how it is. Because in a real fight, Keith Lee would have had a match with Roderick Strong. I mean, the size difference is just too big, right? But as far as sports is concerned, that's where you have to, the sports idea is malleable, where you can be like, well, we kind of got weight classes, but we kind of don't, So, we kind of got weight classes, but we kind of don't. But NXT, ROH, and, NWA Power, these are promotions that I think are very modern, but still stick very closely to the sports-based presentation of what pro wrestling is. And they're all good in their own way. I think the further you go from here, from NXT, the more you get towards the entertainment. And WWE is in the extreme on the entertainment side. I mean, they don't even really keep the rules straight from week to week. There's a reason why Jim Cornette talks a lot about back tags and foot tags and stuff like that. Like, you tag in a tag team match hand to hand. that there's a reason he says stuff like that, because that's always how things have been done. That's tradition. It makes more sense. You know, it's better for drama. But other promotions are just kind of like, two guys touch, they could bump into each other, it's a tag, right? And I've literally seen two guys bump into each other and it was a tag. And sometimes, yes, rules do need to change a little bit, but then you can go too far. And I think not AEW, but ECW went too far, because every match had no rules, right? So there was no such thing as disqualifications in ECW. There was no such thing as a count out in ECW. Everybody can do everything, and everybody did. And there were no barriers. There was no sport in it. You know, sure, there were some matches had time limits, but only the TV title matches had time limits. You know, the rules didn't matter. Nothing mattered. You could do whatever you wanted, and ECW died. And I think that sort of extreme Lexus mentality is not going to work for wrestling. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to kill the audience. You know, you're going to go to the point of diminishing returns, where this stuff is just not going to be interesting anymore. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be too choreographed. You know, this WWE is too scripted. You can go too choreographed. As far as AEW is concerned, a lot of their offense is way too choreographed. You know, it's like a Jackie Chan fight scene. It's like something out of a Drunken Master or some shit, right? You can go too far in one direction or the other. But I think as far as having choreographed spots, some choreographed spots with some traditional pro wrestling stuff, that NXT and NWA, well, not even really NWA that much, but NXT, Ring of Honor, and New Japan is really where it's at, as far as being able to meet most of the criteria that a lot of people are looking for. But, you know, we'll see where it goes. So nobody is right or wrong. It's just a difference of perspective, and that both of them are right to an extent. Cornette understands that you cannot change things too much without completely ruining what it is. The other thing is, you cannot be so narrow-minded as to define something as being so narrow that it really is not interesting to most people. So you have to find that happy medium. And I think you can do both. You could do a little of both. But, you know, it's very difficult, and people are always going to be upset because the first time you do something too silly, you know, you're breaking the internal logic of that world, you know. But I hope you guys like this video. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Twitter. And that's it. Peace.